Anxiety itself is an emotion. An anxiety disorder is something different.
Is there a simple, small, repeatable action that a manager or leader can take today, tomorrow, to show employees that their well-being?
Eat lunch away from your desk. It's simple.
Sticking to core values directly affected retention or team trust.
Let's start promoting people first and not employee first.
Sarah, it is such a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's good to have you. You have a very unique expertise. You've spent, I think you said 22 years as a licensed clinical social worker. You specialize in anxiety, depression, trauma. And then at some point you made a shift to workplace culture and working with leaders. And I'm curious if there was a point in your career where you were convinced that leaders needed your clinical insights just as much as your clients did at the individual level.
Yeah, it's always an interesting question to me and one of my favorites. Because the reason I started working with leaders is honestly to go to the source. We spend so much of our time in the workplace. And when I've been working with my clients in the clinic, we'll come up with these great coping skills that they can utilize. And sometimes they go into their workplaces and leadership welcomes them with open arms. Sometimes they are not criticized for directly, but there's some hints in the culture that that's not accepted. And sometimes they're just told flat out, no, you can't do that. And so what I realized was I really needed to help leaders to understand how they can create healthy workplace cultures where people want to stay. Because one of the things that I'm not sure that leaders always recognize is that if they have employees in their workplace, their employees want to work. And that they just need some modifications sometimes to be effective and productive employees.
I'm really curious, and I know you can't really disclose any specifics or anything like that, but in the individual work that you're doing as a licensed clinical social worker, if you were listening enough to know like work is causing some of these issues that they may be experiencing, and or they have mental health issues that are traumas that are impacting their ability to show up effectively at work. It's probably both those things, but I'm curious, like if you've seen some trends on either way.
Yeah, certainly. There is definitely a correlation there between what is the workplace culture communicating, not just what we say it is, but what is the culture actually communicating versus the impact on the employees. So to maybe give you an illustration, I had a client who worked in a hospital setting. She had a lot of difficulty with focusing and anxiety. We worked on some coping mechanisms where she could put her earbuds in while she did her documentation. She was not engaging in patient care. She was away from the patients doing her documentation. And so we said, okay, we're going to put your earbuds in while you're doing your documentation. And once an hour, you're going to go sit in the stairwell and do some breathing for 5 minutes. So in doing that, she was able to reset her nervous system, regulate how she was doing, and then show up for her patients the way that she needed to. And in that situation, we were really lucky in that her management said, yeah, sure. They were pretty hard, fast about, no, you cannot have your earbuds in front of patients. It's a reasonable request there. And she was able to do that, and she stayed at the job. Whereas before we did that, she was like, I don't know if I can stay in this field. I need to leave. I don't think hospital work is necessarily my thing. It was all the things. And so just really an illustration of when leaders are willing to listen to their employees and say, what minor things do you need so that you can work more productively? Then they have higher retention rates, which is awesome.
What do you believe is like the biggest cultural challenge that leaders are facing right now when it comes to this topic about mental health in the workplace? And whether it's for themselves as leaders, like their own mental health and just how it impacts the culture, or taking care of their people who they have lives outside of work and they may be struggling with something, and then they bring it to work, and whether or not they can perform or not. But I'm just curious what you think is like one of the biggest challenges that they face.
I think that one of the challenges that we face in considering mental health in the workplace culture is the stigma associated with the term mental health. And so oftentimes I will differentiate the terms for folks. So mental health as a general concept is how anyone at all, any human being, thinks, feels, and behaves across environments. That's their mental health. How are we doing? Am I feeling tired? Am I feeling stressed out? Am I arguing with my teenager? Did the dog pee all over my bed in the middle of the night? All of that impacts your mental health,
yes.
Right? And so, we're not telling any stories here today, but if those
I've got them.
if those are the things that are going on, those impact your mental health. And then there is the differentiation of mental health condition. And a mental health condition is diagnosed by a professional who is trained in mental health. And the way that you think, feel, and behave has a negative impact on your functioning across environments that is relatively significant. And so, one of the things that I have found, Brandon, that is frustrating is that our vernacular that we use in everyday culture overlaps the diagnosed condition. So, for example, you will see a social media post where somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so OCD because I want all my bills facing the same way." No, you're not. You're organized. And you like things a certain way, but that isn't OCD. OCD is a condition that is significantly high anxiety, usually crippling for folks to be able to even take the next step in their functioning for anywhere from 5 minutes to 3 hours to a day. And so, or we might say, "Oh, I'm feeling so anxious." Yes, anxiety itself is an emotion. An anxiety disorder is something different. It is pervasive. It negatively impacts your ability to function in interpersonal interactions with folks. It impedes your ability to complete your task at work. And so I think there's a lot of confusion out there about that difference between mental health and mental health conditions.
You have a keynote called Well Aware, and based on what I know about it, it seems like you're making the push for everyday wellness inside of an organization. And I'm curious whether it's in the keynote or just off the top of your head, but is there a simple, small, repeatable action that a manager, leader can take today, tomorrow, to show employees that their well-being truly matters to us as leaders?
I love it. You ready? All you have to do is eat lunch away from your desk. Eat lunch away from your desk. It's simple. And that's the whole platform that I try and really reinforce to the leaders that I speak to, is the things that I talk about are not huge. Most of them don't even cost any money, which is even better, right? But when we talk about simple things that you can do, as a leader, it is your job to create the healthy workplace culture. It is your job to provide the resources for the healthy workplace culture. It is also your job to correct behaviors that are outside of the culture. And then your employees will follow suit and they will retain the healthy workplace culture. So if you are a leader and you say, "Yes, in our culture, we value downtime, we value time off," but I come to your office at 11:30 and you're sitting there scarfing down your chicken noodle soup while you're typing your emails out, you're not communicating the workplace culture that you're promoting. So I want you to pick up your bowl of soup and take it to a lounge space in the office. I want you to take it to a break room space. I want you to take it outside. I want you to take it somewhere. And for 20 minutes, sit down and eat your soup. Don't answer the emails. Don't answer direct messages. None of that. Have a conversation. Eat your soup, but not at your desk.
I love it. I love the simple things too, because for repeatable stuff, that if it's complex, it's probably not. It's going to happen one or two times and you're done. But repeatable stuff like taking your food outside, even if you work from home, just step away from your desk. Go outside if you can. Go to your kitchen table, whatever you can. Just step away, take a break.
Right.
And then I think for leaders too, modeling that behavior is really important too, because people, they're always watching.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that and reinforced it. Your employees are always watching. And so again, making sure that what you are doing as a leader in your behaviors is reinforcing the workplace culture that you're trying to cultivate. Because if you're not doing that, they're not going to believe you that is truly, it's just the slogan that's in the paperwork that they signed at the beginning when they onboarded. That's all it is. It doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm. I think you wrote this somewhere, but I also believe it myself. But people tend to leave organizations where they don't feel valued anymore. And I think there's probably things that leaders do subtly, whether they know it or not, that often sends, like, unintentionally, signals that they're not important. What are some of those things that leaders do that might give that message to an employee that they're not really valued?
I think I'm going to pick on you sitting at your desk for a minute here, not you specifically, but those leaders that are sitting at their desks. So an example of where they show their employees that they're not valued. The employee, we're talking about an in-person office setting here. An employee comes and knocks on the door and says, "Hey, Brandon, can I talk to you for a minute?" You say, "Oh yeah, come on in, have a seat." And as they're talking to you, you're getting ding, 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 all these little alerts coming up on your direct messages on your screen. And so as we're talking, you're going, "Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm okay. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, so I hear that that's what you want. That's good. Oh, yeah. So as soon as you break contact with somebody as they're speaking to you, when you allow the direct messages, the phone calls, the text messages, any of those things to break contact, you are showing your employee that they don't matter. I would much rather, when that employee knocks on your door and says, "Hey, Brandon, do you have a minute to talk?" that you pause and consider the question. Do I have time right now? If you're in the middle of something, I would rather you say, "You know what? It's really not a good time right now. Can you give me 5 minutes to finish up this email that I'm working on and then come back? Or give me 5 minutes and I will come find you." Doesn't matter to me how you reply to that, but be honest about whether or not you're really available. Again, it doesn't cost you any money.
Right. You have a coaching model. It's called the Growth Leader. It blends neuroscience and psychology together. From this coaching model, what brain-based insights about feedback has been maybe the biggest aha or impact on leaders that you've coached over the years?
I think the biggest aha comes out of polyvagal theory. It is one of my favorite psychological theories.
I was reading a book on polyvagal theory.
Oh, excellent. Well, then you're familiar with it, but it's one of my favorites. One of the components, not the whole thing, but one of the components of polyvagal theory is the idea that our nervous system speaks to the other person's nervous system. And it's all subconscious. And so things like if you're sitting there and you're twiddling your thumbs or you're tapping your fingers or you're looking around or you're shaking, you're averting eye contact, any of those kinds of things, if you are doing any of that while someone else is speaking to you, then your nervous system and their nervous system is learning that there's something unsafe going on here. It doesn't have to mean that you're physically going to attack them. It means that you are not psychologically available right now. And so when I talk with leaders about psychological safety, I talk about it from the polyvagal perspective. and teaching them how to notice their own nervous system and how it's feeling, as well as reading the nervous system of the person that they're speaking to. And when you learn how to do that, when you learn how to look at body language, you learn how to read the signals of eye dilation, when you learn how to read these symptoms and these signals, then you can make a minor adjustment. Sometimes it is literally just a process of stepping back 6 inches. You step back 6 inches from the person that you're talking to, and their nervous system goes, oh, okay, now we're safe. We're okay. And then they can focus on what it is that you're actually saying. When you're fighting the nervous system response of not feeling safe and connected, then too much of their brain is focused on fight and flight and trying to get out of the situation. And so you leave their office and they have no idea what you just said, what they just agreed to, what step they're supposed to take next.
Psychological safety, like we talked about it a lot on this podcast. A lot of the speakers, authors I bring on, we all talk about it. It's great on a slide deck. It's great talking about it. It's really messy to implement because humans are messy, and just something like you're just describing, like stepping back 6 inches could make all the difference in how the other person is feeling safe or not. Like, that's how are we supposed to know that? And so, like, implementing these things as leaders is a little tough. You know, I know with like opening dialogue and allowing people to feel safe to speak up, like how do leaders effectively do that without feeling like they're giving away authority or any sort of like clear direction for their people?
Yeah, I think that that's a genuine concern for a lot of leaders, is that they may lose their authority. But what I would remind them is that you get to make the final decision. And by acknowledging that as a leader, you do not know all, but you have a team that collectively knows a lot. And so when you can approach with that mindset, so for example, if there is a productivity issue, coming to your team and saying, hey, I've noticed that we're having a decrease in productivity in this area. I am interested in, where do you guys feel like the bottleneck is happening? Where are the places where your part is struggling to meet deadlines? What things are getting in your way? How can I support that? Listen to the feedback. And this is where feedback loops come in. So listen to the feedback, give it back to them. This is what I heard you say. And then take it back to your office, contemplate, make a decision, decide what you want to do next, and then present your decision back to your team. So that looks like, hey, in our meeting, you guys said X, Y, Z. I considered those things. We can't do X because of budget. We can do Y and Z with these modifications. So this is what we're going to do next. And so now I have shown my team, I acknowledge that I am not the expert in everything, which is a good leader. A good leader recognizes that they are not the expert in all things. And so when they acknowledge that they are not the expert in all things and rely on their team, who they hired because they are an expert in their thing, then you get people who want to stay.
Burnout, I think it rarely starts with a flame. It's probably more like a flicker. So what yellow flag behaviors should leaders watch for when it comes to burnout, whether it's in themselves or in their teams, before burnout like spreads throughout the whole team?
Mm-hmm. And burnout is one of those things that there's a lot of chatter about it. And there's a lot of fix-it things that are out there. And I think that the things that you can be looking out for with burnout are the subtle things. So there's increased errors. So if you're running reports and someone forgot to transfer over a column of data, or they put it in the wrong part, and they don't typically do that. I'm going to pause. I'm going to say, hey, because everybody makes mistakes. So sometimes if it's happened once, you go, okay, that was a bad day. If it's happening more frequently, I'm going to notice. And I'm going to pause. I'm going to check in and say, hey, why are we having more errors, right? You're also going to look for tardiness. So I used to work for one boss who used to laugh at me. I had to clock in. And sometimes I would actually forget. I'd walk past the clock coming in the door, still forgot to swipe my card and actually clock in. And so I'd have to go down to her office and say, hey, can you clock me in for today? I missed my clock in time. And she laughed because she said, you always clock in within 3 minutes of the previous day. You're always within the same 3 minutes. It's 7 o'clock, 7:01, 7:02, 7:03, somewhere around in there, you are clocking in. Sure, I'll do that. So if you have that employee, and now that employee is clocking in at 7:10, at 7:15, they're not late enough that they're causing major disruption, but they're late. They're later than normal, right? The other thing that you can watch out for is a lack of interest in the work, in the field, in just kind of life. If somebody's just kind of looking like they're doing the grind because that's what they have to do to pay their bills, and they've been more engaged, they've been more attentive in meetings, and they look like they've kind of checked out, you probably have a pretty big fire of burnout going there.
You champion reflective leadership. What quick reflection routine could a time-pressed leader who's in back-to-back Zoom calls weave in between those meetings?
So I think I try to practice two. My first one is checking in every transition. So if you move about a space, check in with yourself every time you walk through a door. If you tend to stay in one place, check in with yourself before you transition to the next thing. And the check-in is really simple. It's one hand on your chest, one hand on your stomach, 3 exhales, 4 inhales. So you're going to inhale to the count of 4, and you're going to exhale to the count of 6. And when you do that, it gives your body a time to reset. Whatever you just finished with gives your system a time to go, okay, that thing is now done, and now I'm going to move on. Okay? The other thing is, at the end of a day, I would love to see leaders who ask themselves, who did I connect with today, and what did I learn from that connection? And when you make those connections and you acknowledge that we always have time to learn, we always have a time to learn, then we're growing as a leader.
Empowerment tends to die when leaders jump in and try to fix things. I actually see this at home too. When my wife has a problem, she actually just wants me to listen and not me just jump in and fix it. So how do you coach managers and leaders to shift from this problem solving mode that they're probably really good at, but to genuine coaching and listening and perhaps delegation as well to empower their people?
I think one of the best things that you can do to avoid the problem solving is to allow the other person to be the expert on themselves. And so that might look like if you brought a concern or question to me and I rephrase that question again, I say, okay, so what I heard you say is, and I repeat back what I understood you to say. Is there anything that I missed? Do you have anything additional you would like me to know? And then we can say, is there anything that I can do to better support you? And if you're in a field of leadership where you can offer something specific, whether it be, I can take this small task off of your plate, or it's, I can adjust your time that you have to come in by a half hour if that helps, whatever it is, offer what you can. And then say, what were you thinking about? What would work best for you? And that allows the person to be seen, heard, and valued, which is what we're always reaching for. And it also gives them the empowerment to say, okay, my leader is open to suggestions of ways that I can modify things. Because remember what I said at the beginning, your employees want to work. Sometimes they just need a modification on how to do that.
And individuals or organizations' values often will get stress test under pressure. Can you share a story or an example where sticking to core values directly affected retention or team trust, or failing to stick to the core
Yeah,
values?
I actually experienced it as an employee,
Really?
which is kind of my my launching point for all of this. It was a very stressful moment. I worked for a hospital organization, and we got bought out.
Stressful.
And two programs who had previously kind of been in competition with each other. We worked on similar things. We had a similar format, but we worked independently of each other. We had to merge into one and under one leadership and one program and one building, and it was all switching. And what I really appreciated from management at that point was, again, they had a cultural value that said, you guys are the experts. We want to hear your opinions. And they divided us up into groups of 3 and 4. And each of us took a topic that the program had to address, whether everything from patient check-in to documentation. Didn't matter what the topic was. We all divided into small groups and tackled each problem. And I will not say that it was clean and pretty all the time, because it was not. Feelings got hurt, mean words were said, and it was just kind of ugly and messy and stressful for a while. But at the end of it, everybody knew that their voice had been seen, heard, and valued, and that they contributed to this new program that we developed. And there was a lot more buy-in. You know, we did have some people leave. We had some people leave right when the merger happened that said, forget it, I'm not dealing with it. We had some that left right after, when everything had settled down and decided the new programs didn't work for them. But for the most part, most of those clinicians that I worked with were there for 10 plus years, which is just unheard of in the mental health field.
So on a similar note, I think your workshops, they emphasize inclusion that you can feel inside the workplace. What small experiment or example could you share that listeners could run this week to make their culture feel more psychologically welcoming to others?
I really go back to the listening. When you are trying to create psychologically safe settings, we want to go back to listening. So you want to stop, gather up a couple of your employees, and start the conversation with your own vulnerability as a leader. And so what that looks like is something like hey, I know there's always room to grow. Where are the hiccups that you guys are finding in what we're doing around this particular area? Pick a topic. And just sit back and listen. Just sit back and listen. Don't try and problem solve.
Yeah.
Don't try and go into but we've always done it this way. That's one of the blind spots in leadership, is the loyalty to the way it's always been done. And so we really want to step back and just listen and ask your employees, what's working for you? What's not working for you? And sometimes it really is something simple, basic. In that same setting that I was just referring to in the hospital, we realized that just by adjusting who took a new patient to the next phase of their orientation to the program was completely changed the system. Completely changed the system. The front desk person didn't have to leave her desk to walk the patient to another area, thus leaving the front desk completely open, completely vulnerable, and the next person that walked in thought that we didn't have a front desk person. And so we simply said, oh, well, the one who's doing the next component will get a phone call in their office to come pick the person up. Okay, let's do that. And it worked great. So, like I said, these are not usually really big shifts that people are asking for. They know that. They know that your corporation doesn't have the money to make a big, huge shift. They know that you may not have the money to hire a bunch of more staff. They know all of that. They know that. So trust them. Trust that they can come up with solutions that work for your workplace.
Sarah, I read that you like to recharge by listening to 80s jams and get some massages, go
Mhm.
for dog walks. When you coach leaders who may be secretly fearful that stepping away to do some of these things that you do, like listening to music, massages, dog walks, that might make them look less committed. What do you say to those leaders who are fearful of
I would love to say don't be afraid, but that's really not validating their experience,
that?
right? I think that the thing that I would say to those leaders would be, again, going back to our conversation earlier about modeling.
Yeah. Mhm.
Model what you want the culture to be. So if your culture is saying, I see that you are bigger than your employee status. So if you want to go take a walk, if you want to listen to music, as long as it's not disruptive to getting the work done, then by all means do that. If you need, here in Georgia, we are in the throes of really hot summer right now. And a lot of kids are not in school. And so they're in summer camp programs and things like that. Okay, so if you need to adjust your work schedule a little bit, if that works for your workplace and it helps to maybe come in at 7 instead of 9 and leave at 3 instead of 5 so that you can be home for your kid that was in this half day program, let's do that. Let's start promoting people first and not employee first.
Sarah, to close, I always like to ask this question to my guests. What's one experience, person, or idea that's most shaped the way you think about leadership or transforming workplace culture? And how do you think this still influences you to this day?
I think that the idea that has really shaped me is the lingo of work life balance. And I am an advocate for throwing out that phrase. And that might sound controversial, but the reason why I want to throw it out is because when we think about work life balance, we're trying to reinforce that old adage of leave it at the door. And work is part of our lives. So to try and separate those two things is not realistic. And so I really want to promote life balance and not work life
Mm-hmm.
balance. And helping people to say, okay, whatever's going on at home, in my community, in my, country at large is going to impact how I'm functioning today. And when our workplaces can acknowledge that, then we all feel a lot more psychologically safe.
It's well said, Sarah. Sarah, I so appreciate you coming on the podcast, sharing your wisdom. Where can people learn more about you, connect with you if you're okay with that? Yeah, feel free to share any of that.
Yeah, I would love to. So I am very active on LinkedIn. You can find me under Sarah Harris on LinkedIn. And I believe that Brandon's going to put that link in the show notes as well. I am also very active on my website. So sarahharrisspeaks.com is the website. And there you will find links to other podcasts that I have been on, event postings about kind of what's going on. And just kind of the place to also see that I have a book launching this fall,
Ooh,
where we are going to be working on understanding our culture garden and how to cultivate it.
excellent.
So the book is called The Culture Garden, and it is scheduled to launch the early
Well, we
fall.
might have to have you back in the fall then.
Yeah.
My guest today has been Sarah Harris. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. It's been a lot of fun.